Any moment here. Hey guys, welcome to wow, it's only been a week later, but this time a Google Hangout with our friends over at Optometric Insights, Dr. David Kading and Dr. Mila, two just profound people in the eye care space doing some tremendous things. So we're really happy to be on a Hangout with them today, and today is 100% focused around jobs, careers, resumes, interviews, those types of things. And so these guys have seen it all. They've got very successful practices. We're going to be taking actually a Q&A throughout the time today, which you can either comment on the YouTube channel, where you're probably watching this now, the New Grad Optometry YouTube channel, or you can actually comment within the Hangout if you're viewing there. And so we'll keep a lookout as we talk, and I'll look out for the questions. But let me just go ahead and introduce everyone, and then we can just get right into a question set. And keep in mind this will be recorded so that afterwards you guys can check it out. Myself, Dr. Matthew Geller, I'm the founder of newgradoptometry.com, but also the co-founder of Covalent Careers, who's helping to bring this Google Hangout to you guys today. You can check out that site at covalentcareers.com. It's an online job discovery platform for healthcare professionals, but is currently in eye care. And Ryan, go ahead, tell us a little about yourself, and feel free to introduce Dave and Mila as well.
Sure. My name is Dr. Ryan Court, and I am practicing in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm one of the journalists of newgradoptometry.com and also a co-founder of covalentcareers.com. And we have on the call here Mila and Dave Kading, two incredible guys from Optometric Insights that Matt and I have gotten to know extremely well over the past few years, obviously as students and then transitioning into doctors. And both guys are actually coming to us from across the country. We have Washington and we have Ohio, so two states. And these two, you think they would live in the same state because they're always together, but they actually live on the opposite end of the country, always hanging out. So yeah, great guys. And if they want to say something before we get going, we'd love to have you guys say a word.
Yeah, well, just like you said, Rye, honored to be here, practice in Northwest Ohio, and co-founder of Optometric Insights with Dave, and really we're hoping to share some of the insights that we've learned over our careers up to this point, and even some of the challenges that are really relevant today that are very, very different than when the two of us graduated.
Yeah, I'll just echo with what Mila said. I practice in Seattle, Washington. I'm actually just finishing with my last patient just right before we started here. And, the whole concept of interviewing for a job and getting a job is very different than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, where most of the doctors that you're going to be interviewing with when they understand interviewing. So I think the concept of understanding the millennialist going into and interviewing for a job is very different. So I commend you, Matt, and I commend everybody at New Grad for the way that they're looking at approaching this very subject.
Fantastic, yeah, well said. I think a personal testament about both of you, Dave and Mila, is not only just your knowledge of industry-specific things, but kind of how you're looking in other fields where other things are being done and picking up on those lessons and bringing them back to eye care. That's something that I preach all the time, and you guys are living that every day. Let's get started. I'll go with our first kind of, right off the bat kind of canned question, but how should optometry students prepare for life after graduation, especially from an employment perspective? Dave, if you want to start with that one.
Yeah, so looking at the job market, I think that the big concept that we have to understand is what is it that you want to do when you get out of optometry school. Mila and I often talk about the importance of accelerating your success, and to understand what accelerating your success means is you have to know what success is for you. For me, that was being in private practice, and I knew that I wanted to be in a private practice setting, and I knew that I wanted to own my own practice. So that concept really allowed me to graft what it was going to look like for me to be successful. And I think for a lot of the practitioners that are going through school right now, they may not know what they want after they graduate because they either haven't given it any thought, or they thought, well, maybe I'll figure that out when I graduate, and that's too late. Just like the two of you, you guys started formulating what you wanted for your job and what kind of practice you wanted to be in. and you started setting yourself up for those professions. So I think that the big concept is to understand what it is that's important to you and understand what you want, so that once you do graduate, you can actually look to achieve those things.
Yeah, and Dave, to piggyback onto that, I think it's sometimes difficult for students to really understand what they want, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know the practice settings that are out there. A recommendation that I would make to any student is to really get out there and first and foremost start seeing practices and start visiting as many different types of practice settings that you possibly can, to get a better understanding of really what's out there and what opportunities present themselves. But even more importantly than that, start today. Don't wait till your second, third, or fourth year. And if you're in your fourth year right now, that's okay. Don't worry, because you still have plenty of time. But don't wait. I remember in my fourth year thinking that I had everything solidified, and something kind of monumental unfortunately happened in my fourth year. I was on my second rotation. It was September of 2001, and I was actually at a clinic in East Boston. And I still remember 9/11 going down, because we were right by the airport, and I remember there was this kind of, you'd almost get used to the planes flying above you, so you ignored the sound, and you didn't even recognize the sound was there until it stopped. And I remember that morning because it was awkward. There was just no sound, no planes. But after that, the opportunity that I thought I had with a LASIK cataract ophthalmologist was gone. I mean, he pretty much told me, I don't think I can afford to bring you on. So I was in my fourth year with nothing, no opportunity that I thought I had lined up. So at that point, I started doing everything I possibly could, weekends, evenings. There was an afternoon I had off on my third rotation, excuse me, where I started making phone calls to a lot of optometrists in the area that I wanted to practice. So make sure first and foremost you're starting that process right now, so that you're not handcuffed by the potential opportunities that may or may not present themselves when you actually graduate.
One of the big things that we oftentimes talk about is so important, is to realize where you want to practice. You may not actually know the exact town or the exact city that you're going to end up in, but at least identify the region of the country that you're wanting to be in. And the reason why is that is that you can start forming those relationships. Mila and I go to state meetings all the time, and one of the smartest things that we see happen is when there are optometry students at these state meetings, and they're networking, they're figuring out who the doctors are in the state. And if I'm sitting down to interview an optometrist, and I have a student that I've seen at several state meetings and a student that I've never met before, that student already has a leg up, because I know that they're interested in the profession, and I know that they're willing to go an extra mile to network and to be educated about innovative things. We had several students that I met while they were just students that were at some of the legislative days that we did, and they came up from school and they started legislating with the other optometrists. And those types of relationships that you can establish with practitioners is a real key, but you have to know where you want to practice. So the first thing that we talk about when we talk about finding a job is not identifying the exact practice, but identifying the type of practice that you want to be in and identifying where you want to live in the country.
Yeah, and Dave, one of the other things too is sometimes there's a misperception about interviews. Sometimes we think about interviews as this kind of formal process where you have to call somebody and say, okay, I'm ready to meet you, and now here's where the interview starts. When in actuality, the interview starts the moment you meet somebody. So for those opportunities that Dave was talking about, really getting to the state associations where you think you're going to practice. Ryan, I know that you do this better than anybody else. I remember talking to you when you were a fourth year. And even in your residency, I remember you attending these state conferences where you thought you may be practicing. The interview really starts right from the get-go when you start meeting that person. Sometimes we start to dive into the weeds too quickly on interviewing strategies, because people want to know, well, what exactly do I need to do to make it successful? And I think when we're thinking about interviews and meeting those individuals, we need to take a step back and figure out first and foremost what we want to do, just like Dave said, where we think we want to be, and make sure that the person we're communicating with aligns with that. And even if they don't, that's okay, because they may know people that actually have those similar philosophies that we maybe want to go into practice with, or practice where we want to go.
Yeah, in some ways, just to restate kind of what you said, Mila, is it, you know, we assume that when we graduate that we're going to all be good optometrists, right? I mean, we're going to all be able to fit a contact lens to treat a glaucoma patient. So I assume that when you graduate, regardless of what your grades are, unless you're absolutely failed every class, that you're going to be a pretty good optometrist. So if I'm a private practitioner and I have you coming into my practice, what's important to me is that you're going to take good care of my patients. And for me to be able to trust that based off of just a formalized interview, that's a difficult thing to really build that trust in just that short amount of time. Whereas if I meet you and I spend time with you over the course of several meetings, or I get to know you by going to dinner with you, or I get to know you by seeing how you interact with other professionals, I'm much more likely to trust you to come into my practice and be a member of my team.
Yeah, this is all really good stuff. Ryan, I know we had some other questions that you were particularly keen to ask. Go ahead, share some of those.
Yeah, no, but just real quick on the points that I presented there. You know, eye care is a small industry, so I think a lot of the message was you're constantly interviewing when you're in professional settings, and you guys probably are reaching out to a half dozen ODs about what they know about the person you're interviewing if they have a chance to cross-connect with them before you even interview with them. So it's constantly making that, you know, those touch points and building those relationships, which are key. But we're going to switch gears a little bit. You guys both work in private practices, and just curious, because you guys have a lot of colleagues in different settings, what are some of the pros and cons that you guys see of different practice settings in terms of flexibility, compensation, benefits, and even equity potential?
Well, I'll start out, and I'll start out with private practice. Certainly the pros with private practice is, above everything else, is at the end of the day, you're really creating and molding what you want. So the success or the failure of the practice ultimately lies on you. Some people enjoy that responsibility and really want to take that weight on their shoulders and really want to run with it because they see visions of something that's greater than themselves. Other people don't like that level of responsibility. I personally can't imagine practicing any other way, just because this has been my world for the past 13 years, and I know the things that it's afforded me or allowed me to do. And private practice, with that said, also has the benefits of having different settings. You can have multiple locations, you can have one location, you can have a single doctor practice, you can have multiple doctor practices. With that said, the same things that are potentially advantages are also disadvantages. When you own the practice, a lot of the practice responsibilities really fall on you. So again, it takes a certain responsibility, it takes a certain will, it takes a certain want in order to really excel in private practice. But for those that are interested in it, I think there's amazing opportunities out there.
I'll take corporate optometry. There's a lot of different options within corporate optometry, whether it's a Costco or a lens crafters, and those types of settings are actually not as bad as we may make them out to be. Many times, those types of settings, you have a 9-to-5 job, and you walk in and you finish what needs to be completed on that day, and then you go home, and your responsibilities are finished for the day. And that brings a lot of, that brings a lot of value, that you don't have to do the extra stuff. Some of the downsides of that is depending on the exact setting it is, some of them are owned by the practitioner where they have the setting within the Costco or LensCrafters state, depending on the state. And some of them are run by Walmart or Costco, and you just go in there and work. So depending on that, you really can dictate or not dictate a lot of the ways that you practice. And so for some people, that gives them the flexibility on their own to be able to do the things that they want to do, and then they come to a more structured environment for the things that they have to accomplish. So that works great for some people.
Yeah.
One of the other ones that is great that I think we often overlook is a VA or a hospital setting, and these settings provide some incredible opportunities to see some really interesting stuff. But they also have limitations, and some of the limitations may be there may be a formulary set of the certain types of drugs that you can prescribe. You may be limited as far as what you're able to do. And Mila, one of the other ones that we don't talk about often enough, and I'd love your comments on that, is academia and practicing in academia setting.
So Dave and I have had the good fortune of interacting with a lot of people that are academics. So they work in the schools, they teach and they train the students, and we've all been part of their world through our academic years, and we've been fortunate enough to even interact with them after the academic years. The great part about that is usually they have some level or some sense of security in the position that they have. There's some guarantee in salary, there's some guarantee usually in benefits. There's a lot of opportunity for advancements within the organization depending on the goals of the person that's there. So they even at the same time have access to a lot of the newer information on a lot of the research, partially because they're doing some of the research and partially because they're constantly interacting with a lot of the individuals that are doing the research. With that said, just like being part of every large institution, there are guidelines and bylaws and things like that may not necessarily apply to those that are in smaller practices or independently run practices. One of the things too that I just want to kind of clarify, just a small little point for me, is that we refer to this a lot as jobs and job interviews and things like that. I think to formulate a student's perspective on success, I think they really need to make sure that they're thinking about what they're doing right now, in particular when they're interviewing, as interviewing for the career. I mean, that's really what they're doing. Jobs are potentially what the employees that you maybe have at your practice have, but you certainly don't want to strive and go to school for 8 years, 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of optometry school to be stricken to a job. Ideally, you're hopefully looking for a career, and that's what this offers you. So there's a lot of different settings. One of the ones that we didn't talk about either, Dave, was the ophthalmology setting. And the advantages to that are similar to the VA in that they have usually an expanded scope, and they are usually working with ophthalmology, and they are dealing with a heavily disease-based practice. If there is a disadvantage to that, it is that usually you're in an employment situation, which if you're looking for ownership is sometimes difficult to acquire or obtain in ophthalmology owned practice, although you can, and we both know people who are in those situations where they actually are co-owners or even own practices where they employ ophthalmologists, but usually they're employed by ophthalmology. So again, we're fortunate that we have a lot of stuff and a lot of options.
Yeah. I'll bring up one other of the discussion points that you asked, Ryan, but we didn't necessarily cover is equity. And equity, the best way that we think about equity is it's something that you build over time, and then at some point you get something back for it. And in most of the settings that we discussed, other than the ophthalmology one that you mentioned at the very end, Mila, is you don't build a lot of equity. But in private practice, if you become an owner, that's something that I work for every day. Someday, I want to sell this place. I want somebody to take over my patients and to be able to go on and make this practice successful. But I'm hoping to get something for that. I take a little less money every single year than I would maybe in another setting because I'm putting it back in and buying new equipment and doing remodels to this. And if I was not an owner, that wouldn't be my money, but as an owner, that's money that I make that I could choose to take and go buy a new car or buy a boat or buy a bigger house. But I have the option, because I'm an owner, of investing that back into the practice in the hopes that I'll get a larger return on my investment when I sell.
Yeah, that's a great point, because sometimes when we're thinking about equity, we always get concerned about are we investing appropriately in 401ks and stock market, things like that, and everybody usually has a well-diversified portfolio, but when you're talking about equity in the practice, it's something that we kind of forget that is is an actual investment. So, Dave, you may be making a smaller investment into your 401k, but you're matching that in the practice. So you're still creating an investment portfolio to a certain.
It's another portion of my portfolio right now. You know, stocks are down. We're not getting a huge return on the stocks, and I may actually choose. Okay, I'm going to invest more money into my practice this year, and maybe invest more money into the stock market another year when it may be a better year for stocks. So it's just another opportunity to get invested.
Yeah, fantastic advice, guys, and especially on that equity piece is something so important to understand, and something that we can heavily research from both a financial and a legal standpoint as well. Let's dive into a little bit less philosophy and things that are these things that are kind of advice that always goes around. Let's dive into specific details. Let's take a turn, and each of you guys give me one tip for your favorite resume tip, and one of your favorite interview tips. Just one for each. The top one, I know it's a spur-of-the-moment question, but really, what's the one thing that stands out to you guys on a resume, and what's the one thing that stands out to you guys in an interview that we could translate to advice for not even necessarily optometrists hiring, but also optical staff or opticians? It could be a general piece of advice, or it could be very specific to eye care and optometry.
Dave, I'll go first on this one. For the resume, it's somehow having a connection prior to sending the resume. You can go online anywhere and create a reasonably good-looking resume. And for any optometry students or anybody that's coming into the optometry field, I can almost predict what that resume is going to say. But knowing the person prior to getting them the resume or hand-delivering it will stand out head and shoulders above anybody else. And the one real tangible tip that I would give anybody, if given the opportunity for an interview, be genuine and make sure you're very direct in doing two things. One, being genuine in what the practitioner is actually looking for, and two, being genuine in what you're actually looking for, and not necessarily molding what you're looking for when you hear what the practitioner wants. So if I say, listen, we're looking for somebody that loves pediatrics, and Ryan, you're interviewing with me and you're thinking in your mind, boy, I really love specialty contact lenses, but you know what? I can make the concession and say I like pediatrics so I can get in this practice. Don't do it, because you're going to put yourself in a rabbit hole.
Even if I live in Lima, Ohio, you're saying you don't want them to twist it just to get into the right practice?
Oh, exactly right, Rob.
I'm just kidding with you.
Be honest. But yeah, make sure you're genuine with your intentions about asking the practitioner what they want, and then be genuine with your response. Don't, like I said, try and pigeonhole or rabbit hole your response to what the practitioner is looking for.
So when it comes to a resume, I could care less about a resume because most of them look the same. But on a resume, some things that stick out to me is other things of service or other things of publication that you've done. Have you looked at trying to get an article written? Have you looked at trying to publish some of your work, or have you done some research in a certain area? Those are things that can kind of make you stand apart. Being a fellow of the Academy, a student fellow, that's an important thing. Being an active member of the AOA, and maybe even having gone to some conferences, that tells me that you're interested in doing something above and beyond. But more important,
Matt said one thing with the resume.
So the one thing I would say is actually giving me a good cover letter, because I think the cover letter is more important than the resume itself. And then on the interview, the side of, you said two things on the interview, but
Yeah, sure.
the one thing
You called me out on it, so it's okay.
the big thing on the interview that I like so much is the questions that somebody asks me. So come in prepared to ask me some sincere and genuine questions, because when you come in and you're just expecting me to ask you questions about who you are, but you don't have interest in understanding more about my practice, I don't know that you're going to be the right candidate for the practice, because you're just here for a job. You're just here to take the job, but you want something that's going to land and going to fit for you. So teach me something about you, and you want to know something more about my practice.
Sure. Ryan, I'm going to cut you off for your next question real quick, because, guys, we are taking questions live, both on ODs on Facebook. We're taking questions live on the YouTube channel. We do have a question from Brett. What is a good first step when reaching out to an employer or mentor while you were in school or when you first graduate? I guess, what is the personalization side of that? What's that first step to reach out to that person? I mean, are you email blasting people, or are you making phone calls? How do you get in front of them?
So it's interesting. In light of all the technology that we have, we're actually starting to revert back. Everybody's getting so used to getting these automatic birthday reminders, getting these automatic things that they know aren't personalized, that we're literally going full circle where people are appreciating more of that personal touch. My advice, initially when you're reaching out to somebody, best way to do it is person to person, so in person if you can. If you can't, that's okay, but make a phone call and establish some type of discussion prior to sending an email, because when it's an email, it's faceless. I don't hear the tone in your voice. I don't understand how interested in the position of my practice you are or not. I'll give you a perfect example. So we get emails all the time about candidates and people that are asking about a position at the practice, but I don't really know how interested they are, so I don't want to sit down and respond to a lot of these emails, even though I do, until I'm actually figuring out how interested they are. So face-to-face if possible. If they can't, establish some type of relationship with the phone. Pick up the phone. I know it's going to feel uncomfortable, but call the office of the optometrist and ask to speak with him first, and then follow up with emails to continue the conversation, set up meetings, do everything else after that. You'll see things will naturally progress after that, whether or not you're going to establish that relationship or you move on to somebody else.
One other key tip that I would suggest is, with any correspondence that you do in either establishing a mentor or looking at a job, always respond and send a handwritten thank you note. That speaks volumes in today's world. And we're used to getting text messages and emails, but not everybody gets something in the mail. And it speaks volumes if you do something simple like that.
I had a patient, true story. So we printed up all the forms.
Your stories have been lies to this point.
So this is different than most of my stories. This one's actually true. So we printed out the forms on Friday for the patients coming in Monday, and he had his 75th birthday. So they came in, and he actually crossed it off, and he said, "I'm 75." He goes, "Yeah, you sent me a birthday message, a happy birthday message." And I thought, oh, God, I'm not even completely 100% up to speed on the processes that we have set in place on how we actually interact.
Ryan, why don't you go ahead with the next one?
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing I'm really kind of curious from your guys' perspective. A lot of the people watching tonight are, they're going to go in and they're going to try to figure out, after they get into the interview process, maybe there's some interest from both parties. How do they really determine their actual value to an optometric practice? And another question on top of that is, let's say they get an offer and they feel that that they have a little bit more value, or maybe they got an offer that was above offer. That's great, but they want to do a little bit of negotiating, but they don't want to burn that relationship. What do you guys recommend for those two pieces? How would you approach those situations?
So I think, first of all, Ryan, you should establish a local feel for the vicinity where you think you're going to be practicing. And because of the access to information that we have right now, there's no reason why anybody shouldn't be doing at least some preliminary research on what the median or the mean or the going rate for an optometrist is in the area. So you should have some familiarity there, again, because rural areas are going to be different than large cities. West Coast is going to be different than East Coast. So again, there's a lot of regional variability. So you have to have a good sense of that, because that's going to be the barometer. And then in my mind, the next step is, what do you want to do in the practice? It's going to be a very different conversation if I want to be an employee. So Ryan, let's say I'm interviewing with you and I want to be an employee at your practice and I have no interest in ownership. And I tell you that right off the bat. That conversation is going to be very, very different than, you know what, Ryan, I want to be an employee first, but then I want to work my way towards ownership. That's a very different conversation than I only want to practice 2 days a week. So I only want to be an employee, but I only want to be at your practice 2 days a week, and I don't want any of the administrative overhead work. Let me give you the easiest way and my personal, in my mind, best way to kind of tailor this response. And I'm going to use the example of, you're going into a practice, you're interested in employment initially, and then moving into a partnership or full ownership of the practice where you're at. At that point, everybody needs to be a little bit more open or exposed with the actual numbers of the practice so that the person that's walking in, me, understands the financial situation, Ryan, that you're in. And then what we need to do is we need to somewhat understand each other and come to somewhat of a consensus. So if I'm looking for an ownership stake in the practice in 1, 2, or 3 years, I may be interested in potentially taking a little bit less of a salary or a little bit less of a guarantee with more of a risk. And what I mean by a risk is maybe part of my compensation is based on a strict salary, and then part of my compensation is based with some type of what I'm going to refer to as a realistic bonus incentive, because there are bonus incentives that you'll never hit, and then there are bonus incentives that are realistic. And the actual numbers, Ryan, are just going to really, really depend on where you are and what the financial stability of the practice that you're entering in is all about.
You know, when we're first looking for a job, the person who has almost all of the power in the situation is the person who is offering the job. But after you've been in the job for 6 months or a year, that power can shift a little bit depending on the OD that has come in. And the reason I say that is if you come back at a practitioner with a request for a higher salary or a negotiation in those early stages, as long as their offer is within a reasonable amount, right? If it's within an unreasonable amount, you can just, graciously decline, because that may not be the place that you want to be. But if it's within a reasonable amount and you just think that you're worth $25 more a day or $50 more a day, you have to look back and ask yourself, why is this practitioner offering me this job at this amount? Let's take, for instance, let's just say that me as a doctor, I own my practice, I am the only practitioner in this office, and I take home as my salary, let's say $100,000 for easy money. $100,000, that's my salary as an owner of this practice. I'm going to now hire another optometrist at $400 a day, easy money again, $400 a day, and I'm going to have them come in and work 2 days a week. If you run the math on that, that's about $40,000. That $40,000 is not going to make itself automatically. That's going to come from my salary as the $100,000. So I'm making $40,000 less so that you can make that. Now, after a year, if we see that my salary's readjusted itself and you've added patients into the practice, we can then go back and renegotiate that, because I'm making a sacrifice initially, you're making potentially a sacrifice as well, but ultimately, as somebody who's coming in and a new person into the practice, you actually have to be able to give and take a little bit on what your worth is. Now, if you're going into a place that's established, has had associates in the past, and has a really good position where they need an OD because there's 4 or 5, 6 weeks waiting period for a person to get in, you may have a little bit more leverage, but you have to know the practice. So I would say that it really comes down to, after 6 months or a year, being able to renegotiate so that you actually find your value in that practice.
Yeah, I picked up on two key things there. Oh, I'm getting some feedback from myself. 2 key things there that were pretty paramount, I think. Can you guys still hear me, actually?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. 2 key things. One, I have so many new graduates come to me and say, Matt, going into a practice, I'm about to start, I feel like the salary is a little low, but I feel awkward negotiating. I'm willing to negotiate, but I'm really not sure how or how to justify it. And a lot of times it's easy to say coming up with an incentive bonus will be a great strategy. So the ways you can do it is you can outline a specific set of criteria to say, if I achieve maybe X amount of patients, X amount of sales, if I bring in maybe a new modality of care, if I help you with your marketing and advertising, then I can achieve a certain bonus. And it's great for both parties there, because if the employee achieves it, they get new compensation. And if that helps the employer as well. Sorry, I'm getting feedback, guys. And so basically, in essence, you're able to support both parties there. I think one of the interesting things overall is that contracts are never, there's never just a clean way. There's no rule book of this is how exactly you achieve this in a contract. Contracts can be how you want them to be, and they can be flexible. They can be creative, and so never feel like you need to
100%
mold. It's okay to be creative. It's okay to come up with something unique. On another note, let me see. Hopefully, I'm not getting feedback now. On another note, matching with the correct employer to start when you begin a practice is a really interesting area, I think. I know so many young doctors who got started and joined essentially the wrong practice to begin with. And they stayed for a year and they left because it wasn't a good fit. Maybe there was no opportunity for buying into the practice or something like that. And they ended up resenting optometry after leaving, when really it was that one particular employer that they didn't have a good fit with. And you know, in today's day and age, 2015, with the amount of technology and ability out there, that's one thing that Covalent Careers is seeking to help achieve and not let that happen. Ryan, you can touch on that a little bit if you want, because I'm worried that this feedback is distorting the audio. But if you can touch on how Covalent is helping find and pin practitioners together who want long-term relationship goals to be the same.
Yeah, I mean, the whole design behind the website actually was, you know, coming from more of a recruiting aspect. I used to work in recruiting, HR, engineering, and IT recruiting, and Matt obviously knew a lot more on the technological aspect. And we're trying to allow people to really discuss a lot of those core things, whether it's, you know, opportunity for growth on the front end, any kind of specialty, any kind of residency training, any kind of practice environment flow pieces. Maybe you don't even really know what modality you want to get in 100% because the landscape and the culture of eye care, and not only that, healthcare is shifting. Personally, I recommend keeping all doors open. I mean, I did a residency because I wasn't sure if I wanted to practice in an ODMB setting or even work in academia or work at a VA medical center, but I knew in my heart that I wanted to get into a private practice. You know, how did I keep all of those doors open? And at this point, my recommendation to all people out there that are, whether they're, you know, third, fourth year students, they're in the residency, they're even 1 to 5 years out, it never hurts to make as many connections as possible. Your first job most likely won't be your last. It might, and you may hit the, you know, the jackpot on the front end. But you know, the same thing from the employer side. They know that they're the first employee they hire, from either, you know, an optometry standpoint, you know, all the opticians or even the technicians that they bring in, there's going to be some fluctuation. There's going to be some give and take. There's going to be a lot of HR, you know, kind of woes that go back and forth, especially on, you know, the technician side and the front desk side. There's a little bit of turnover in those areas, but if you can keep a good core team together, they know the big pictures that helps their practice or their company a lot more. And so a lot of the things we're trying to do is kind of align people with the same ideas, the same mentalities, the same goals, aspirations, things like that.
Yeah, you're right, Ryan. Yeah, you're right, Ryan. Giving us the ability, seekers of people who are interested in starting their career and people who have opportunities, you're really accelerating the ability to find those commonalities so that certainly the best way is organically, but you've created this web presence where you now are creating this organically on this site, and it's cool. You're just going through it and understanding it. It's almost like a personality match. And an employee-employer relationship sometimes feels like it's dating, and it's kind of the sense I got going through the process with Covalent Careers. So it's good because you want that person that's a good match.
Yeah, no, great point. Sorry, I think, Ryan, if you could just lower your volume slightly there, I think that's why we're getting some feedback. But yeah, I think one of the questions on Covalent Careers, the great aspect of it is you can say, I'm looking to buy into a practice, or I'm looking to just remain an employee, and you will only match with those people. But anyway, let's bring it back to you guys and back to some of the deeper questions here about finding that first job, which will, as Mila said, and so is so accurate, bring you into your career. What do you guys find is one of the biggest, I guess, places that a potential job seeker or career seeker will fall short, and how can they overcome that?
Matt, I can't stress this enough. Start now. Doesn't matter where you are. The biggest challenge that I see right now is that somehow people are thinking that somehow things are going to fall into place, and as of right now, you have the opportunity to start now or to kind of wait on things. And starting now means, okay, let's start asking questions. Let's start asking those tough questions, like, where do I really want to live? And do I even know that? And if I don't, that's okay. If I have flexibility with that, what type of setting do I want to be in? And if I don't know, that's okay. Start visiting practices. But do something where movement is actually starting to create and formulate where you'll hopefully be after you graduate. So Matt, the most important thing that I could share with anybody right now, in particular into getting into ideally what they hopefully want to get into and the type of practice setting, is to start right now.
I think that's huge. I don't think, I think most people, like you had mentioned, they figure that they get through every single position in life, right? They make it through high school, they make it through undergrad, they're in optometry school, they're doing their residency, and they feel like they put in the time, the energy, that something should come to fruition. It is difficult, it is really difficult. And guys, you two, I feel like have built a beautiful niche. You guys both are very successful private practitioners. You guys have Optometric Insights, which is an amazing resource for people. You guys are out in the lecture series, inflicting knowledge on people right and left. How do new graduates compete in the marketplace today? I mean, not only from just their career as an optometrist, but also their career as getting out and actually building relationships with other healthcare providers, getting
Ryan,
out and trying to either get into clinical studies or.
Ryan, don't think about it as competition. I can tell you right now that there's enough room for everybody. Like, look at Dave, and Dave, what he's created in Seattle is something else. I mean, if somebody said, Dave, create a dry eye center in Seattle, create a specialty lens center in Seattle, 5, 10 years ago when he did it, they would have said, you're crazy for doing that. And he said, you know what, this is where my passion is, and this is where I see a void and people aren't being taken care of, and he did it. And there are all of these opportunities everywhere. When we start thinking about it as competition, we start thinking too much about what other people are doing as opposed to how to emulate our best self. And when we do that, it's almost in my mind, a waste of good, both mental and physical resources into, again, competing against other people versus literally walking down your path, figuring out what's best for you, and ideally getting help from people along the way and helping people along the way.
Yeah, we've been taught ever since we were little that do what you love to do every single day, and in a career we want to find ways to make money doing that. I love doing optometry, as Mila stated. I love doing dry eye. I love doing specialty contact lenses, and I found an area where people need that, and in fact, people everywhere need that. And so I could go anywhere and do what I do, and I wouldn't be competing against anybody. I would be complementing their own practices. Mila is another prime example, and I guess we're scratching each other's back, but in Bowling Green, in Bowling Green, Ohio.
No, you're the best, Dave. No, you're the best, Ryan.
In Bowling Green, Ohio, how many practitioners should there really be? According to the statistics of this many people live in a city and this many optometrists should be out there, Mila shouldn't be successful in his city because there's far too many optometrists. But yet he has one of the premier practices in Northwest Ohio. I was going to say premier practices in Bowling Green, but that limits it to what, 5 or 6? But the cities that are out there, and the traditional things that people tell you of what you need to do to be successful couldn't be further from the truth most of the time.
So Ryan, don't think of it as competition. When you think of it as competition, you think of it as wasted resources. You get out, you figure out what you want to do, and you go at it hard, and you start meeting those people, and you start doing all the stuff that we've been talking about throughout this whole discussion here today.
You'll crush it. Mm-hmm.
No, I appreciate it. No, I definitely think that mentors has always been a big thing, and I'm not even only speaking on behalf of just Matt and I, but just a lot of our peers that they feel the pressure is on, and so having good mentors and having good people to reach out to and trying to understand the exact dynamics of what to do to really jumpstart their career is really important. I think a lot of people now, when they're even finishing up, some of them say, okay, I want to go back home some of them are saying, I want to relocate because I really, I'm not married, I don't have kids, and my parents are, now they're retired and they're jumping back and forth between a couple locations. Do you guys see a lot of people that you're mentoring now are pretty open to relocating and for an opportunity? And what do you think are some of the pros and cons to that? I mean, what are, obviously, if you're coming from one place and you have an established friendship and connections and patient base versus relocating for the right opportunity, have you guys talked to a lot of people that are kind of doing those things?
I mean, much more so, actually, and I've seen this evolution of kind of going to different places to practice or for different opportunities is becoming a little bit more of the normal than it was even when I graduated. I feel like I graduated just yesterday, but it was 13 years ago. So I've seen that a lot more so. One of the things, or some of the big things that I think that anybody needs to think about when they're thinking about that opportunity is, one, how important is being really close to home? Because some people can do it and they don't need to be close to home. Other people literally need to live right down the street from their mom or dad or brothers or sisters. So you need to figure out how important that is. Me personally, I live about an hour and a half from all of my extended family. And you have to cross a border to get there. So it's great because if I need to get there, I'm there. But it's not something where everybody's always in each other's business. So it's really a nice kind of balance of everything for me. And again, I wanted to be in the U.S., or I wanted to be a practitioner in the U.S. as well, too. One of the other things is, and again, it's obviously going to be a lot less restrictions on somebody that's a single person as opposed to somebody who's either seriously dating somebody, engaged, or certainly married. So those are other considerations, because then how important is family to that person? And are they from the same area where you are? And it just creates a whole other level of dynamics. So you have to kind of figure out how important is being close to family and how far away are you kind of interested in going from family, depending on how important it is to be really, really close. And then you establish your geographical range from there, and then you start pursuing opportunities.
Hey, Dave, I know that you had to, Dave, just real quick, I know you had to head out. We do have some questions coming in through YouTube. Can you hang around a little longer?
Yeah, I can hang out for about another 5 minutes.
Okay, sure. Do you mind if I throw in a question there, or do you want to just finish that thought?
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Okay, cool. We've got a question here from Daniel Griffith. Are there any suggestions about how to approach a practice owner who is looking for a new OD, but they want to hire either before you are done with school or a couple years after you graduated? Which is, I really think, a great question. I've encountered that a lot of different times with friends. Dave, if you maybe want to take that one.
Yeah. Can you read that question again, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. This is from Danny Griffith on YouTube. Are there any suggestions on how to approach a practice owner who is looking for a new OD, but they want to hire either before you are done with school or a couple years after you've graduated?
Thanks, Matt. So, approaching... approaching somebody who's looking at somebody before or a couple of years after, the big thing there is to make sure that you find the right fit. And if I have to wait a year to be able to get that right fit, or if I, am a couple of years out, that doesn't really matter to me as somebody who's looking to hire. I want the right person. And there may be other people that would be the right person, but if you're the person who's going and looking for a job and you find the perfect job, but this practitioner isn't in the right time frame, it's constantly staying in contact with that practitioner if they're not hiring right now, and just saying, hey, I'm available at some point. I'd love to work with you. If it ends up being that you have a perfect practice scenario or a setting where you're looking for somebody, I'd like to put my foot in the door. One of the other things that's a really bold move, but bold moves generate some great outcomes, is to say to that practitioner, I'd like to come in and work in your practice and work in bringing in a specialty that you don't currently do. Maybe that's vision therapy, or maybe the practitioner doesn't do any glaucoma, or maybe they don't do specialty contact lenses. And you go out and you grow that type of business for that practitioner, and just go into the practice and say, hey, you don't have to pay me anything. I just want to start growing this, and maybe you can pay me based off of the volume of patients I bring in. And that's a pretty bold move, and it tells that practitioners that you're willing to eat only what you kill and what you bring into the practice. So that's a pretty bold way of going about it, and doing the same sort of thing if somebody's looking to hire somebody before you graduate. Just saying, hey, you know, if you end up hiring somebody and they're not the right fit, I'd be really interested in coming to work with you later on. I'm not sure if I answered that question the right way, but
No, I think it's great. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and you almost become someone where you really have to sell yourself in that way, and that's tricky. Timing is something that's very real, and you know, I like to believe that all things happen for a reason. But Dave, great way to describe that. Yeah. Did you want to head out, Dave, and just maybe close with a closing thought? And Mila, if you could hang on a little
yeah,
longer.
I do. You know, I was going to piggyback on something that Mila said earlier. Is with regards to finding the right practice at the right time. You know, Optometric Insights, we're all about accelerating your success. So we want you to be successful sooner than you would normally have been, because you're utilizing the resources that we direct you to, like Covalent Careers, or if you're using some of the resources that we create on our website. But one of the big things is finding the right place that you're going to live and going to that place as soon as you graduate. Now, if you're wanting to go out and you're wanting to, you know, explore the world, that's an important thing to do, and that's okay to do. But ultimately, having the end in sight at the very beginning will allow you to get to your success much faster. And we think that nobody that gets to a successful place in their life is ever regretful of how they went about doing it. Sure, we get some scars and some, you know, some nicks and some bruises along the way, but ultimately doing things that guide you in that laser-like focus to help you crush it in your career. You know, thanks Matt and Ryan for what you guys are doing and helping other people to be successful. Mila and I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, and definitely just want to, I know Millie's going to stay on, but check out optometricinsights.com and really try to catch Dave and Millie live. I mean, they just have the most fantastic content and just general ideas that are coming out now that I've really seen. So, fantastic stuff, guys. Thanks Dave.
For joining us.
Good night. We'll talk to you later.
Take care, Dave. Ryan, do you want me to? I got another question here from some folks over YouTube again. Hang on, let me just pull it up. This is future Dr. Julie Chow, and her question is, and I guess I can answer this one, but let's go to the other one. Do you think it's necessary to list your LinkedIn account on your resume? Not sure if you guys heard about people making websites for the resumes, but what is your take on that for our field? I'll just give a short intro on it. I think it's makes it, no matter what, they're going to find your LinkedIn profile. It's very easy to just Googling, you know, Matthew Giller LinkedIn. You'll be able to see mine, and they'll get their hands on it in some way. And I think if you're able to show it and be proud of it, I think that's a valuable thing. When it comes to a site about yourself, like an online resume type of site, I think it's fantastic, but I would have it more than just your resume. Maybe a post or two that you've authored or some of your thoughts on a particular topic in the field. A lot of websites that, or resume style sites that you can put out, do have an area for your own kind of personal blog, and maybe there's a few professional opinions you want to put out there. I think the more you have to set yourself apart, the better. Just make sure that it really represents who you are and is done professionally. But Ryan, I know you can touch on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, listening to Neil and Dave, the organic approach is an incredible approach, probably by far the most effective. And now taking Storm is also having that really professional online presence. And I preach this to even any new graduate or any OD I talk to. I mean, you want to be able to make as many touch points in person, but you also want to make sure the information that you have online, whether it's on LinkedIn, your Facebook, you know, Twitter, Covalent Careers, all the different websites that you put yourself out there professionally, that you keep it professional, right? I mean, it's real easy to click post or tweet or throw something up on Instagram. Just ask a lot of the celebrities and professional athletes out there. A lot of them put their feet in hot water real quick. So build yourself on the organic level of going to state meetings, getting involved, really that grassroots effort, and then keep things extremely clean online. Keeping a professional, good LinkedIn profile updated, huge. I mean, you can't lose that way.
Ryan, you literally emulated exactly what I was thinking too. And LinkedIn, Covalent Careers, there's all of these professional sites and professional facing that, as the interviewee, you'll also even get an idea of so let's say, for example, you're interviewing at a position at Premier Vision Group, which I'm still trying to convince you to do, right? but if I say, oh yeah, don't worry about sending me your resume, I already saw it on LinkedIn, you already know something about me. You know at least I'm connected professionally in some of the circles that people are just generally accepting as kind of the business websites, and you know enough that I actually searched you. Now saying that, please be cognizant and cautious about your Facebook pages because those can be your best friend or your worst nightmare. We've actually we've started to research Facebook pages a lot more for employees, technicians, opticians, and anybody at the front desk. And we found out things that were deal breakers on Facebook and just how they're literally emulating themselves out there. So the last thing you want to do is create this really great relationship with the person that you're interviewing with. I check your Facebook, or I just check you out online, and I see things that are not consistent with what I saw live. So make sure that when you're online, you're keeping it clean.
The Brad Paisley song's so much cooler online. You know, you get on there and, you know, people are trying to emulate these different ways. And the fact of the matter is, it's good to be completely transparent about who you are if I'm having this conversation with you two in person as well as via this computer right here, you know, and anything that you put out there.
Yep, I agree, Ryan. And just make sure that there's almost a false sense of security when you're posting things on Facebook where you don't necessarily really understand. It's a concept called abstraction, where you don't really understand the true ramifications it has when it gets out there because you're so peripherally removed from everybody that's actually going to be receiving the information that it almost sometimes doesn't seem real to the person entering the information until it's out there and somebody calls you on it. So just be very, very cautious and cognizant of that. Again, the last thing I would hate is somebody to put themselves in hot water because of the reputation they've developed on Facebook, Instagram, any of these other social media platforms.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a lesson that once you cross the boundary, you never kind of forget how to you know, make sure you don't do it again.
Well, Matt, learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, I could tell you lots of mine, but you know, my motto is fail often, and you'll learn a lot. And just make sure you pick yourself up and, you know, learn from those lessons. Another question here from Western University with Julie Chow. Basically, something I presented last year. Let me present the question first. Last year at Western News Blink Conference, Dr. Gillen mentioned the awesome idea of bringing in a business plan for an established practice after doing some research on the practice. Example, area of practice, approximate annual gross, etc. Does bringing info into employers ever come off as abrasive, and what is the best way to present your value to the employer? It's absolutely a phenomenal question. And so the idea behind that, by the way, was instead of just showing up with your resume, to come in with just, you know, a small binder of, you know, maybe 10 pages of different things that you could bring into the practice, different modalities of care, different advertising, different marketing ideas and things like that. And basically just under each heading you would say, you know, this is what it would cost, this is how I think it can stimulate growth, this is the risk involved, and really just spelling it out to the best of your ability, maybe researching some of the competition in the area and the ways to capitalize on new avenues. And so that's something that I had done but for both practices I joined, which worked out fairly well for me. And I can see what she's saying there is, can that come off as being too much, as saying, you know, I'm young, but I really know what I'm doing, and I kind of want to really carve out a place for myself here, or can that be a beneficial thing? Dr. Brujic, what do you think from a standpoint of being an owner yourself?
So I love this question because I think to anything that becomes eventually implemented into a practice. So let's say, Matt, I'm interviewing you for an opportunity at Premier Vision Group, and you say, hey, Dr. Brujic, I looked at your Facebook presence for Premier Vision Group, and I know it's not where it should be. I think it needs to be increased. Yeah, okay, that's a good fact, but that's the idea. That's like the easy part of any plan. And if anybody ever brings up just an idea, that can almost become almost too offensive or abrasive. Now, if you told me, hey, you know, your Facebook page isn't what I think it could be, and it's not emulating the excellence that your practice has to offer, because I've been in your practice, and I don't think people are seeing that on your Facebook page. So here's what I think would be amazing, and I've actually had experience doing this, and I think if we did X, Y, Z, I could really up that and leverage that. And this is how I think we could do it. We wouldn't have to hire anybody, or we would have to hire this company, or whatever the plan is, but this is the product, and this is how long it would take, and then I would follow up with it as well too to make sure that this thing's being successful. That's a completely amazing conversation where I'm listening to you and I'm saying, huh, this person's really done their research and they're really interested in and almost have a vested interest in the practice. That's very different than a person saying, Dr. Brujic, thanks for meeting me. You really need to do work on your Facebook page. Okay.
So two similar ideas, right? But it's all about the delivery.
You just called my baby ugly without giving me any of the my baby looks, if that makes sense. Any type of implementation plan, the idea is always, in my mind, oftentimes the easy part. That's the thing that you might be at a bar with your friends and you guys might just have a casual conversation and say, oh my gosh, this is an amazing idea. You write it down on a bar napkin, you have it in your pocket the next day and you say, this is an awesome idea. But as you guys know, building what you did with new grad optometry and covalent careers, where the back starts to get sore is when you actually start implementing that plan. And that's where every owner that may seem a little bit dissuaded by an idea, that's why it is. Because they've gone through things where they've potentially tried to implement things and they failed through that implementation phase. So when they hear a new idea, it's not necessarily that they don't want to try it or that they don't trust you, but it's them thinking maybe back on past failures. So what you need to do is you need to try and get around that. And the way that you can do that is be as prepared as possible without being, like you said, abrasive or offensive, saying, this is how I think the practice can be better. This is my plan. This is how I would help you if we kind of join forces. And this is how we would follow up with it so that we can metricize it over time.
Yeah, fantastically well put. I think we do all have great ideas, but it's the implementation, it's the execution which set people apart. So I think for Julie, yeah, with that topic, I would go for it. I would produce a short version of what you think can benefit a practice, but like Mila said there, you have to outline the step by step. You have to kind of do research on what you think it will cost and what you will think it will bring in. It's just an exercise in numbers. I mean, the chances of you being right with your numbers is so slim, but that's okay. You refine your numbers as you go,
Yeah,
and I think
exactly right, Matt. You're so
yeah,
right.
you refine your numbers as you go. I mean, when we were planning out covalent careers, oh, the original financial projections are silly. They're nowhere close, and I think that's the sentiment in a startup type of field. That you put it out there to get an idea, and I think when building numbers around something, if you want to show, well, what can a Facebook page bring in, you just do a bell curve. What's the low end? What's the high end? And where are you most likely to fall in the middle with your numbers? And that's a great way to plan out whether it's financial or just in general analytics and things like that. But I would go for it. I think it sets you apart, and I think that in my experience, so many young practitioners, healthcare practitioners, and especially optometrists underestimate what they can bring to the table. And I think you all should put yourself through that exercise of putting something on paper and really, like Dave and Mila said, start early and plan this out, because you'd be really surprised what you can produce and the skills that you can bring to the table.
Yeah, Matt, and the perception too, and particularly of new grads, is even from my era, I don't consider myself old. To some, maybe everything's relative to what you compare it to, but my perception of new grads is a real technical savviness, and that's actually what I'm enjoying about talking to younger individuals, because again, they have this spark in their eye. They want to change the world. They want to do something, and they want to use technology to do it. So again, that's a tool that you guys have on your side. So leverage that without being abrasive.
How do we get what if someone wants to work with you, Mila? How do they go about that?
Jump on covalentcareers.com or call me or email me directly. We're actually looking for a future optometrist in the practice in Northwest Ohio, at Premier Vision Group. So we're looking to bring on the next superstar.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I can't stress enough. If that's really the case, that's an incredible opportunity. And you can visit Optometric Insights to get in touch with me personally, but also if you do create a profile on Covalent Careers, you'll be able to see him on there. I don't want to go over the time. I want to be respectful of your time. We can close it out with some final thoughts here. I just want to thank you, and once again want to direct some attention to what Mila and Dave are doing with Optometric Insights. They're delivering a higher class education and live presence, the better than any I've ever seen, and they're really starting to make waves when it comes to bringing people together, both seasoned practitioners and young practitioners, and they've got a very respectful name out there. And so if you want to work with them, check them out, of course, and if you want to work for them or just participate, I think there's enormous potential there, especially at the Vision Expos and things of that nature. And you could always look to us to be working with them. We've worked with them a lot in the past. Mila, what kind of final thoughts, and Ryan, what kind of final thoughts do you guys have for nailing the interview, the resume, being successful in your career?
I personally think, and I've said this several times, and I hope that this resonates for everybody that's watching this evening, start now. And don't think that it's too late. If you're in first year, you don't have that much time. Start now and start making those phone calls, start connecting, start thinking about things outside of the standard kind of mold of the education, and don't be afraid to make phone calls. Go visit practices in the areas or the schools where you're actually going to school. Just as a perfect example, I was the guy in optometry school that read optometric management. I mean, even in school, it just intrigued me. I was a student in my 4th year that at the East Boston Clinic, I was asking the optician, so what does a lens blank cost? And what's actually involved in edging it? And how much do frames cost? And what insurance plans do you take? Because I had a real passion for attempting to understand this. So start that whole process now, and don't wait, because it's really the start of the rest of your life. So the sooner you get started, the quicker that trajectory is going to be to get you to the success that you want to be at.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that was said. And another point is, it's never too late to pivot, right? So if you're a new grad watching this, if you've been practicing for 10, 20 years, a career is a career. I mean, there are endless opportunities out there. If you feel like you're stuck in a dead-end opportunity that you're unhappy with, or maybe you want to make that step to relocate or move closer to your family or whatever it may be, you got to go with your heart. And when you go into those interviews, you're not trying to fool anybody. Be yourself. You're going to be much happier in the long term if you really put it on the table. There's no reason to try to fit into a position that is not the exact position for you. So that would be my advice. And lean on some mentors and just do your best. Forget the rest.
Spot on, Ryan.
Yeah, I think just any closing advice, like the guys at Optometric Insights do, look outside of eye care for what the future of the profession can be. Take lessons from other people, take lessons from other industries, read books outside of this, pick up the optometry magazines and eye care magazines, but look at what else is going on. I think that is hopefully, or not necessarily hopefully, but that's partially where the answer lays for us to find out what's right. Never underestimate yourself. You guys are, everyone watching who's going to be getting their first job or their next job or starting their career, you have enormous potential, and you just need to put that focused pen to page and deliver something. And like Ryan said, really do what's a good fit for you. You don't need to rush an opportunity. Find something that's going to fit, and you'll be happier in the long run. And definitely plug yourself into just as many resources as possible when doing that searching for your position.
All right. That was fun.
Yeah, guys, I'll just close it out. Thank you once again, Dr. Dave Kading and Dr. Mila Brujic, optometricinsights.com. Catch them live, catch them in person at one of the meetings as well. Ryan and I, Dr. Ryan Court, Dr. Matt Geller, you can find us on newgradoptometry.com for resources and content related to these topics. But also, if you are looking for your next position, covalentcareers.com is a place where job seekers can create a free profile as well. So we definitely look forward to supporting you guys in the future. We've got another 2 of these lined up, I think, before the new year, and so we've got many more planned. And I know we'll get Dave and Mila back on because they have a wealth of information. Especially, we've actually never tapped into them for clinical knowledge. So that's something that could be tremendous. I think they're clinical geniuses. So. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ryan.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
Be good, guys. Keep up the good work.
You too, bud. Take care.
Thanks, guys.